Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Movie Script channel. I'm your host, Charlie, and today I'd like to discuss one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies, Species 2. Now, before I talk about the film, I'd like to just say a big thank you to all my new and current subscribers. I truly appreciate your support, and if you can, hit that like, comment below, and as usual, use an ad blocker on all my videos. I highly encourage it. Now, with that being said, let's get into the film Species 2. Now, I'm going to start right off the bat and say that this film is not beloved at all. It's not a good film in any sense of the word, but there are things that I highly enjoy. And if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, you can see that it has a very low critic and user review score. But there's something that I just truly enjoy about this movie. Now, I'm going to go over the good, the bad, and the ugly about this film. But let me go ahead and start off with the basics. So Species 2 came out in 1998. The film stars Natasha Hendricks as the female alien Eve, Michael Madsen as one of the security guys tasked with finding him, although he does a shit job in this film, Justin Lazard as Patrick, he's one of the astronauts, Marge Hellenberger as one of the doctors that is in charge of taking care of Eve, and finally Mykelti Williamson, which plays the token black guy, and his dialogue and his behavior in this film is complete cringe. The movie also has James Cromwell in it in a minor role, and I think this is the start of James Cromwell doing really shitty movies, because it started with this and then he made a lot more horrible movies afterwards. So without getting into any spoilers, here's a basic premise of the film. So 3 astronauts in the near future end up going to Mars to grab a soil sample, which sounds ridiculous in itself, to send 3 human astronauts all the way to Mars just to collect the soil sample. But anyway, on their way back, the soil sample opens up and there's this goo that's an alien species, and it attaches itself to 2 out of the 3 astronauts. Now, throughout the film, the male astronaut is basically running around and repaying women in order to have kids. So throughout the film, he ends up finding these women, he ends up repaying them, and then within a minute of after finishing, the woman gets ripped open and a 5-year-old kid comes out just looking helpless, and it is absolutely hilarious. It's one of the things I love about this film, but I'll discuss that in the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, Natasha Hendricks' character is back, and if you watch the first film, you would think that's a bit confusing. I don't want to get into spoilers of the first film as well, but let's just say that she shouldn't be in the second film. But basically the reasoning is that her character is recreated by the government, and Marge Hellenberger's character is in charge of watching over her. But the entire reason that she's created is so the government can find weaknesses with the aliens, so that if the aliens ever come back, they're prepared to kill it, which, to be honest, makes sense. Now, without getting into any specifics, the male alien tries to get with Natasha Hendricks' female alien, and chaos ensues, and blah 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 blah. That's the general gist of the movie. So with that out of the way, let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly of this film. And let's go ahead and start off with the good. And this is one of the major things that I love about this film. And the first thing is the practical effects. The practical effects in this film are fantastic. There's even a shotgun to the head explosion, which is, it's fantastic. You don't get many head explosions lately, and this one has a great one. The practical effects, the designs of the aliens, all of them are fantastic. Now, the second thing that I enjoy about this film is the schlock. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous of the scenarios of what occurs. Also, the rapé scenes are they're not cringe, they're more gory and gross, and it's one of the things that I really enjoyed about this film. Like, when these women experience the birth, it is just nasty and it is juicy. Now, the final good that I wanted to mention about this film is Natasha Hendricks herself. You know, she really laid into the role and she does a really good job. I mean, she feels very believable as Eve. You kind of root for her throughout the film, and it doesn't hurt that she is just drop dead dead gorgeous. I mean, there's scenes in this where I'm just staring at her and I'm like, oh my god, she is just so beautiful. So there you have it. You've got great practical effects, you've got schlock, you've got these scenes that are just over the top, and you've got Natasha Hendricks pulling off a great role and looking beautiful doing it. Now, let's go into the bad. Now, I gotta admit, I had a little bit of a fight with myself because I didn't know what to put this one under bad or under ugly. And the first thing that I wanted to mention was the returning actors, specifically Michael Madsen. I mean, he really phones it in this film. It feels like he just does not want to be there at all. Marge Hellenberger, it seems like she knows what kind of film she's in and she's only like half trying, but she's not doing an awful job. But Michael Madsen, there's times in the film where I'm watching it and then I completely forget that he's supposed to be the protagonist, that he's supposed to be the one that captures the astronaut alien, and he is awful at his job. He never arrives on time. So yeah, the cast, specifically Michael Madsen, Marge Hellenberger to some slight extent, and then the guy who plays the male astronaut, he doesn't do anything particular. He's not awful, but he's not good either. He's just meh. But yeah, the cast, man, they really phoned it in. Except for Natasha Henstridge, she's the only one that puts in any effort. And James Cromwell, to an extent, I mean, he's not pulling off some magnificent acting, but at least he's trying. Now, the second thing that I wanted to mention about the bad is obviously, the plot is pretty nonsensical and weak. I mean, the male astronaut is just roaming around and just raping and murdering these women, and it seems like nobody's doing enough to stop him. I mean, he's a famous astronaut. He's literally on a cereal box, and yet they just can't seem to catch this guy. So some of it just seems kind of half-assed. And of course the dialogue is crappy, but I don't know. How much can you really blame a sci-fi horror film from the late 80s that's a sequel to a film that they didn't think was going to do so well? Like, how much can you expect from the dialogue, With that being said, let's move on to the ugly. I'm going to start off with Michael T. Williamson. He's the black guy in this film. He plays this guy called Dennis Gamble. And I'm not going to say that it's the actor's fault, but this guy is your typical token black early 90s character that just says the most stupidest shit. Like, throughout this film, his character is just constantly horny, constantly talking about getting booty. He's just like seeing girls and he's like, ooh yeah, and it is so cringe. And I'm talking to you as a Gen X person who is okay with politically incorrect characters. You're talking to a person who's watched 48 Hours and another 48 Hours, and I have no problem with films like that. I'm also the type of person that doesn't require it. I don't look at those films and say like, oh gee, I miss the days where you can just say the N-word freely. Like, I don't care about that stuff, but it has to come off natural, and Michael T. Williamson's character's dialogue it comes off as written by a white guy. It's just awful. It's so bad. I guess that he was supposed to be the comic relief, but there's nothing that really made me laugh about his situation. If anything, it was completely cringe. I think I laugh more at Michael Madsen at the fact that he's just so fucking bad at his job in this film. Like, I honestly, if you've seen it, you gotta comment below and let me know of your favorite Michael Madsen fucking horrible at his job scene, because there's so many good ones where he just arrives and you're like, god damn, you're just awful. But Michael T. Williamson's Dennis Gamble character, just absolutely awful. I think the only really ugly thing that I wanted to discuss in this film is the CGI. There's some great practical effects, but unfortunately it's mixed in with late 90s CGI, and it it doesn't look good. It's not completely cringe. It's not Lawnmower Man. It's not that bad, but it's not that great either. It threw me off a little bit. There's a couple of scenes that has a mix of CGI and practical effects, and again, it's noticeable, but it doesn't completely throw me off of the movie. But the straight CGI effects are just awful. But the practical effects, I mean, just really outweigh it, especially the way the aliens look. Later on in the films, when the alien morphs, it's gross. It's absolutely gross, and it's great. As I've said, there's something that I enjoy about this film. It's kind of like a guilty pleasure. It's a wild film, especially if you love body horror, if you love practical effects where women are getting ripped open from their stomachs. You got to watch this film. One of the things that I actually didn't mention in the good and bad and the ugly, I don't even know if I can classify it as any of that. It's just comical to me. I guess you would call it bad, but there's something funny about it. Whenever the male astronaut was rapéing these women, he would end up, well, I didn't even know if you can call it rapé, because in the beginning he's just finding these women and having consensual sex, but they don't know that they're about to get ripped open and a 5-year-old kid's about to pop out of them. When you when you see these women get ripped apart, it's so brutal. And then, at first he's just kind of freaked out, and then other times he's not freaked out. This is the problem. But the kids themselves, they're just silent. Like, they don't talk or anything. They're just sitting there. They're sitting there next to a ripped open body, and every time I saw it, it just made me laugh. But yeah, that's Species 2. Like I said, it's an awful movie. I acknowledge that. I have no problem acknowledging that. But it's a guilty pleasure of mine, and it's just one that I wanted to briefly discuss. Anyway, what do you think about Species 2? Have you ever seen it? Have you ever seen Species 1? If not, watch it and comment below. Let me know what you think of it. Anyway, that's it from me today. Thank you so much for listening, and you all have a lovely evening. Take care.